Alrighty, we're going to sit through some more of this Trimet board meeting. We just got done with the Safety Advisory Committee, where they spent most of their time trying to legitimize their decision to keep Opal away from their process. Yippee for them.
Have kind of continuing
Oh,
kind of
oh yeah,
updates on the agendas and things.
that's Stovall. He just, let's see, he won the Gresham. He won the Gresham mayor. Gresham. I knew that guy was going to be a politician. Let's see. Okay. Oh, for Christ's sakes, you fucking ad blocker. Fuck you. Going in. Margin is razor thin. Okay, let's see. In fact, the count was actually closer than it was in the morning. Travis Stovall has 16,310. Wow. To Eddie Morales. Eddie Morales, 1,600. So there's only 110 votes between them. Wow. Well, we hope that he gets this, and we hope he gets off the Trimet board, because I'm tired of listening to him.
Like that, so that we can be well informed, because this is something that I think our stakeholders, our community, our transit-dependent folks, our BIPOC folks, our Black, brown, and Indigenous people of color are going to be very concerned about and very interested in. So again, I just want to say thank you for all the hard work, and I look forward to the continued work that's going to go on in this important topic.
Thank you, Director Stovall. Wow. Any final comments on this?
That's all this really is a cheerleading squad.
I'm hearing none and seeing none. So, Mr. General Manager, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. And again, thanks to John, and there's a whole team behind John here. And I think something from my perspective that I see that is that when you really stand back and look at this, between the efforts going into the data analysis, the vastness of the research itself, not one group is here to drive the agenda. As you can see, we've tried to intentionally and consciously, whether it be youth, whether it be homelessness, whether it be behavioral health, whether it be our own employees, is really this is probably the widest extensive outreach in listening we've tried to do. Are we perfect? I don't think so. I think it's hard. I'm not sure what perfect looks like. I'm so far from it myself, but I think our efforts are really trying to do this really important.
I know. And I remember where we left off, right? Okay. So Gardner got done with his presentation showing all the wonderful people that's involved in this reimagining the Trimet security, which has turned into this giant technocratic, bureaucratic process. They just turned it into the usual. I'm surprised they haven't hired some consultants. They turned it into this whole big production of baloney, and so he's wrapping it up.
Important work that has to culminate into recommendations to come to the board. And as John's indicated, we need to do this in an openly transparent way. And I think there's not one thing that is going to be a quick fix. Some of this is evolutionary, it's cultural, there is systemic bias out here. So it's going to be short, medium, and long term, I believe, that what you will see come back to you in different forms. To the point that I really liked that Director Edwards made around the piloting piece, that fourth bullet on one of the slides, we're going to have to venture into things and be willing to fail, to come back, to regroup. So that's where the word pilot is. So we're going to get over our skis a little bit on a few things that all of us, we have to financially be able to afford, particularly in today's world that we all live in economically. So we're going to have to balance all of those things. But pilot for me is to test new muscle that we haven't really contemplated before.
I love it when people are making $400,000 a year talk about, well, we have to be able to afford this stuff. The guy who's making 400 grand running Trimet, which is much smaller than some of the other agencies, and they get 100,000 less than him.
Just unleashing it blindlessly to have to pick up massive pieces on the other side. So I think I'm personally looking forward to still what's possible, but we're still very much at a listening stage. So to whether it be Opal, to our other partners in the community, other government agencies, please, as others have indicated, put your thoughts in writing. We want to hear those. And there are numerous ways to connect and communicate. So and if we haven't got it right, this journey is going to continue. You just don't get to, I think we're scheduled for the November board strategy session. So do not want to have this as a separate, just part of the resolution. We want to take strategic time to really contemplate this, to factor in, as President Warner, you've indicated, to factor this into our priorities, our strategic business plan, into the way we do business. And yes, ultimately that.
You can see why I had to stop watching these, because it's painful. It's like watching Biden. It's like watching Trump. It's like, it's painful. You're watching these sociopaths up here conducting their sociopathic business.
That'll be supported with the financial budget process that we're under now. So I think the timing does come together appropriately for the cycle that we're in. And I think there's other members of the community that have they've tried to bite this apple in their respective jurisdictions. They've already pushed already pushed things off for a year because they've realized how complex these things are. We're not doing that. We're taking a different approach. In fact, some elected officials I've spoken to directly have said, wow, we're going so fast. How can you go so fast? So, well, if we go back just a number of months ago, they
haven't done anything. What do you mean, how can you go so fast? Nobody's done anything. Wheeler won re-election. Okay, the Portland version of Trump. Looks like, I don't know who's going to win. Who cares who wins the presidency at this point? I couldn't care less anymore. I'm completely tuned out of that one. All of this politics, I just want it to be gone. I don't care about it whatsoever.
Charge. There was a call to action, and that's exactly what this board, I believe, and I applaud the board for doing this, and what management's trying to we is the call to action, actually activating that call to action with a purposeful and meaningful set of disciplines to get to the outcomes that we will bring to you in just less than a month. So thanks to everyone for this really robust and really important discussion. So, and John, thanks to you as well. I'm going to segue. You're not finished with me yet. I'm now going to ask Dee to perhaps give us an update on our budget. We know our ridership is down.
Brookshire is actually one person that you can listen to, and she actually makes sense. It's not bullshit. Because, she's numbers, she's telling you, she doesn't give you all the information, but it actually makes some sense. It's not just like Kelsey just did all this bullshit. This last 2 minutes of his speech was all crap. Brookshire, she has interesting information. Let's listen.
We heard earlier, particularly for September, down by 60%. Less fare revenue coming in. There's a relationship, of course, even though we've turned fares back on. We also know the economic challenges that are continuing, not only here at Trimet, our riders. This is so. The
economic challenges. Everything at Trimet's running normally, except they cut the bus service. Let's take a look at this. Okay, for revenues and expenses, total revenue for fiscal year to date is below budget, $58 million. Or 28%. Total operating expenses are $31 million. So, okay, operating expenses from their cuts are 20% below the budget. Variance from budget, a net result, $26.9 million, whatever that means. Significant variances in system operating expenses and project expenses. Passenger revenue, $6.2 million. Or 40% of budget. But they got the CARES Act, okay, that's supposed to make up for that. Compared to same quarter 2019, revenues are down 18 million. Okay, here's the important one here. Let's see what this one says. The fiscal year 2021 adopted budget adjusted payroll were down 67 million. And let's get this, not pandemic that did this. This is lockdowns. It's not the pandemic. It was government policy in response to the pandemic. Let's get that straight. Because all of these governments lying to us about all of this. They keep pointing it at the pandemic. They keep pointing, well, because of coronavirus, all this shit happened. No. All this shit happened because of government policy. response to the pandemic. Rather than increasing health services and making a mask mandate, they shut the whole fucking world down. And if you want to learn more about that, go to corbettreport.com. Okay, first quarter 2021 payroll are down by 6.2 million. This was due to the extension of the self-employment tax. All right, so there are cuts here. Now we know that they've lost money, but why is the only thing getting cut service? That's the only question I have for these people. Why aren't you cutting the management? Why aren't you cutting the marketing? Why aren't you cutting the government affairs? Why aren't you cutting the IT? Why aren't you cutting the other departments at all?
Painful to have to go through, and we all have experiences.
Why don't you cut your salary?
We know somebody else who's been
He hasn't cut his salary, has he?
Impacted by this. And I want to just thank Dee for the incredible task and her own team of undertaking to managing the budgets in these a bit of a rodeo, buck and bronco kind of time frame of instability. So Dee, thanks for your leadership on this and trying to help balance it. So if you can give us a quick update, that'd be great.
Sure. Thank you, Doug, and good morning, President Warner and members of the board. Just as a quick recap of the quarterly report you received earlier that was quite lengthy with lots of graphs and so on. All the numbers are relevant to the end of the first quarter, September 30th of 2021, fiscal year 21. So hitting the high points on the revenue and expenses budget to actual information, our total revenue for the fiscal year in the first 3 months is below budget by 58.7 million or 28.3%. Total operating expenses are 31.8 million or 19.9% below budget. And the variance from budget in net results is 26.9 million or 7.1%. Now, the large variance on the revenue is due to a very simple matter, and that is on the CARES Act. We expected to receive a huge piece of that in fiscal year 20. We did not. We received it we expected to receive it in fiscal year 21 and so budgeted, but in fact received it in fiscal year 20. Under operating revenues, we have passenger revenues at 6.2 million or approximately.
Wait a minute. So they already got the CARES Act before when they budgeted it. So wait a minute. You gotta listen closely to these people.
Approximately 40% below budget. Compared to the same quarter last year, and the passenger revenues are down 18.1 million or 65%. That this is concurrent with the ridership estimates, which are now running about 40 to 41% of pre-pandemic levels. Moving on to our non-operating revenues, our payroll tax in the first quarter of fiscal 21, our adopted budget adjusted payroll tax revenues are down by 67.7 million due to the pandemic projections. So that was what we put in the budget. But in the first quarter so far, our payroll tax revenues are greater than budget by 6.2 million or 7.2%. And this was due to the extension of the self-employment deadline to July 15, 2020.
Wait a minute. Okay, during the first quarter of fiscal year 21, payroll tax revenues are greater than budget by 6.2 million. So that means they have more money than they budgeted for. That was due to the extension of the self-employment deadline. Oh, I see.
They pushed tax receipts into the first quarter of fiscal year 21. And due to this fluctuation in timing of receipts combined with the projected loss in payroll tax based on Eco Northwest projections as well as our own, it is really too soon to estimate with accuracy the full fiscal impact on fiscal year 2021. But we do believe that after the next quarter, we will be able to do that, to provide you with that. Moving on to grant revenue, our grant revenue totals 41.9 million for the quarter. Compared to the budget, grant revenues were down 58.2 million or 58.1%. And this was due to the timing of the receipt of the CARES Act revenue between fiscal year 20 and 21 that I told you about. By the end of October, Trimet will have drawn down all available funds from the CARES Act award. And this does not mean we will have spent it all. This means that we will have drawn it in-house. It is on deposit. We expect to consume the funds by the end of fiscal.
Wait. Operating expenses are 90 variance portion of revenue. No, let her talk.
Year 21. As for system operating expenses, we have first quarter are 17.4% under budget, or 26.5 million.
Under budget
Reductions
is good.
are mainly pandemic related.
Operation.
Key areas include lift and ATP expenses are down due to a significant drop in demand. Diesel fuel throughout the agency costs are down. Personnel services are down due in part to the hiring freeze. Savings from service cuts offset by increases in personal protective equipment and supplies, and reductions in merchant banking fees due to reduced HOP credit card activity. Our operating project expenses include repairs and maintenance to existing infrastructure. The fiscal year 2021 budget has a total of $31.5 million in operating projects. The first quarter expenses incurred are $2.8 million. Of the budgeted $5.3 million for the quarter, variances are due primarily to timing of operating project expenses. The largest operating project spend is noted in safety and security in the amount of $1.4 million for bus operator protective barriers. Moving on, our general fund debt service activity through September 30th, Trimet deposits, including interest earnings.
All right, wait a minute. 31.5 million in operating projects. First quarter expenses are 2.8 million of the 5.3. Variances are due primarily to timing operating project expenses. The largest operating project spend is $1.4 million for the bus barriers. Man, that's a goddamn, that's nothing to the change orders they give out in capital projects. Shit, at the last meeting, they just handed out $120 million in capital project baloney. Or was it
debt service funds total $42.7 million, and principal and interest payments to bondholders totaled $25.9 million for the first quarter.
Bondholders.
Trimet's total net position at
bondholders. Okay, see how the banks have pushed themselves into a public service. This is, the banks make profit off of public services. This is the neoliberalism. They sell the Trimet bonds at interest. And so they're making profit off of a public tax service, which in my opinion is completely unethical, illegal. Well, it's not illegal, obviously, but it's how it is, it's an oligarchy. So the oligarchs have stuck their goddamn tentacles onto these things.
September 30th, 2020 is still a very robust 1.8 billion. This is a measure of the difference.
Okay, all right. See this? 1.8 billion is what they got. This is the measure of the difference between assets and outflows. Total liabilities, and so their net worth is $1.8 billion. In other words, they are not short of money.
Difference between total assets and deferred outflows, total liabilities and deferred inflows of resources of the agency. Trimet investment portfolio. The September investment portfolio report notes total unrestricted investments of $231.4 million and total restricted investments of $420.6.
So what does that mean anyway? They have some kind of portfolio, unrestricted. I don't know what that means. 231 and restricted 420. Both restricted investments and unrestricted, plus the gain loss of any market value investment, agrees to the total amount reported on the statement of net position. What the fuck is this supposed to mean? See, the restricted for Trimet capital projects. See, they make sure that they have, by law, the money set for the oligarchy that has to go to the oligarchy and can't go to the people. It's by law. And we know how that works. The people that run the system have figured out a way to codify all of the theft.
Million, both restricted and unrestricted.
Oh, look, okay, now look down here, okay. The 9.2 million of it restricted Milwaukee Light Rail. What is this doing? I mean, that's done. What is that all about? That project's done. Why is there $2 million in there? Isn't that Milwaukee Light Rail?
Plus the gain loss on any market value investment adjustments agrees to the total amount reported on the statement of net position for unrestricted plus restricted cash and investments. The restricted for Trimet capital projects of $332.7 million represents bond proceeds from various debt issues that is restricted for specific capital project spending. The $9.2 million of investments reflected for the PMLR project consists of funds restricted for use on that project.
So what is this? Why is there $9.2 million restricted for that? That's already going. What's that all about? Why is that even there? And they have $332 million restricted only for their Stacy and Wickback cronies.
So I know this is a lot of information to just throw at you very quickly. I would invite you to take another look at the quarterly report and come back.
Yeah, I'm sure
if
they're
you have
gonna.
any additional questions. If you
so
have any questions currently,
clear as milk.
I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, right.
Any questions or comments from the board? This is the information the Finance and Audit Committee did see earlier this morning, and we did have some questions. I don't know whether that committee, any of the committee members want to comment on this also, but here it is.
I would be curious if the board, is the frequency about right coming back quarterly? I wouldn't mind any feedback on that, President Warner.
Yeah, I've got feedback on that. Quarterly is, in my opinion, way too long in a world that seems to change so quickly. So it would be helpful to have something a little more frequently.
Yeah, good for you, Ozzy.
Even if it's comprehensive. Clearly, the main thing is if there's any revelatory changes, any major shifts from the previous update. I think it's really any course correction information would be very useful. If the projections today are still viable a month from now, it's good to know.
Could you imagine somebody like Eric on this board? Man, they would never have somebody like him on there, but somebody like him who's needed on these type of boards.
Sure. Well, we do provide a monthly report on our financial condition, and it does have some information. What I can do is add to that and make sure that you have anything that is specifically worth noting regarding projections. For example, the way that we receive our payroll tax, it is simply too soon for us to know whether or not we are going to experience the significant downfall we're expecting. Some of the changes that have occurred recently regarding some of the cost projections have widened the gap that we're expecting in fiscal year 23, and we'll talk to you more about that at a later date. Happy to do that.
Thank you. That's precisely the kind.
And at least the Tiger Light Rail got defeated. Thank God for that. That was the stupidest idea. What a time now. Although a lot of these things seem to be passing in various places, which is insane. I can't believe people are still voting to raise their taxes. But, people are pretty dumb. This is a very dumb country.
Kind of update that I think is meaningful to me personally, and I think to the board.
As just to follow up, Director Gonzalez, on your comment, which I think was excellent. Would you be comfortable if we planned on a quarterly update? In addition, we'll give you, as Dee's indicated, the monthly update with some suggestions. However, I'd like to suggest a second, an additional, that as part of the general manager's comments, if there's something structural that is, particularly, we're in the early months of the year, it gets tighter as you go through and there are more things to unfold. If there's something structural, then I will commit to have that included specifically in the general manager report on the non-quarter months. Would something like that work for you to keep you apprised as well?
It helps, yes, and I think to just kind of recalibrate our course if we are indeed, if the gap is widening or if it's shrinking, that I think is very critical status update.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you. Good feedback. Okay, Dee, thank you very much. We're going to move on now if we can. I'm just going to jump right into it for sake of time here. Sam DeSue is going to... Oh, sorry. Sorry, Director White.
It's okay. I had my little hand thing up. Just a quick question. Oh, no, you're fine. So obviously we're hearing a lot about, the transportation measure that Metro is putting forward. It's been getting a lot of time on the airwaves, different opinions on the issue. Can you talk a little bit, and it could just be brief, or it could be maybe at the next board meeting when we know whether or not it'll pass, of just that impact on our agency, and particularly as it, obviously, right, relates to transit improvements.
Let me try and tackle this one. I'm just as, and this even came up today on the Finance and Audit Committee a bit, is knowing the ballot has dropped formally, and Trimet, we are not in a position to provide any comments for legal reasons that may sway or...
I can't wait to hear the next report. We can't talk about the ballot, then, well, you lost. You can talk about it now.
Influence the ballot one way or the other. So I might take you up on your suggestion if I can give you an update at the next board meeting on the impacts to whether it's going to be whatever one it's not, we won't spend time on. Whatever one it is, we'll probably spend time on. If you're okay with that, include in the next board meeting.
Yeah, that's fine. My second comment is I'm just continuing to think about the effects of COVID and how right nationally and locally it's just affecting so many folks who have already been facing many disparities. And I just was wondering if we can maybe overlay some of the finance and audit reports or information with impacts on equity and impacts on diversity, because we do have, a board adopted equity framework statement. And I think it would be really important, I think, for us as a board to see our financial statements, whether it's monthly or however, we want to proceed with that, also sort of layering in a little bit of the equity analysis or that piece. I think it would be really important for us to also, again, remember to sort of center the work that we have done and really also focus on some of those equity impacts, if possible.
Yeah, I think maybe what we could do is I'll work with Dee and the team behind the scemes. Maybe in the financial updates, we'll actually maybe put a commentary section on equity in there, and then maybe we can kind of test it and see does that make sense? Is there enough in there? Is there too much in there? So let's maybe take a first cut on it for the next round, and like to solicit your comments as to is it meaningful?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And if I could comment on that, I know that if you remember, we had a discussion at our, I guess, whatever we want to call it, retreat with David Bragdon and the other folks. And I think there was a lot of discussion about what kind of information the board needs, on a regular basis, financially and otherwise, to really feel good about what's happening and understand what's happening in the agency. And I know Director Bauman has had a conversation with Shelley and following up from that. And so I think all of this is a really good discussion. I want to make sure that we get the information we need as a board. I think that's kind of the discussion we have, but also not putting undue burdens on staff to just produce reports. So I think we need to be mindful as a board about what we actually think is important and what staff thinks we ought to have. It's important too. So I suspect this is going to evolve over the next few months as we go on here. So I know Lori, if you have any comments on this item, but I think it's another bigger discussion.
Right. I do have a concern about overburdening the staff, but at the same time, we are in extraordinary times.
Overburdening them?
Tracking the changes that are happening.
They have nothing to do now.
One idea that I had would be to have a list provided for us of what are the reports that we receive regularly just kind of a recap so that we understand what we're seeing, and that could help us then talk about what do we need anything different. And I guess the one graph that I've mentioned a couple times is the one that shows attendance among maintenance staff. And Shelley helped me understand why we need that. But these are the sort of things where I say, okay, we're getting this why, and how does that help us understand the agency? And so I thought a first step would be to have a list of what are the regular reports that are prepared, and then maybe we could look a little harder at, do we need more? Do we need less? What's the reason for each one?
Perhaps what I could do is Shelley, maybe as we put this list together, I think Director Bauman, as you've indicated, we will circulate that around to each person, and I'm going to ask Shelley to follow up with each of you. And if we think there's a bigger discussion needed, then I may actually suggest that we put this on either as a formal part of our briefing, or I'm not sure we'll have time in November for the board strategy session, because that's going to be about reimagining safety security primarily. But we'll figure out how we get to a broader connecting the whole board together if we think there's significant gaps that are worthy a wholesome more conversation, if the board's comfortable with that approach.
I think that sounds good.
Okay. Thank you. So thank you, Dee, very much. I am going to move ahead, if I may, and just remind everybody, you're still part of the general manager's update. And I'm asking to turn over to Sam to see if you can just efficiently, he says, move through the quarterly performance update, talking about data that the board had interest in. So here's one of those examples right now. Over to you, Sam.
All right, thanks, Doug. Good morning, President Warner and board directors. This morning, we're going to present to you the second quarter 2020 system performance report highlights, and we're going to feature the months of April, May, and June of 2020. And what we're going to do is compare the months April, May, June 2020 to the same months of 2019's performance.
What's the point of that?
The key highlights for this report are the continuation of our rail rule violations.
There's no point in comparing the 2 years since they have nothing in common. What's the point? I mean, this is a new. Everything started when they shut down the world. Okay, that's when everything started. You can't go back and say, okay, this is what we were doing a year ago, because it doesn't apply now.
Decreasing. And also our bus collision rate is one of the lowest in the last 5 years. Yeah, so we'll talk about that. But also primary with this report.
Considering there was nobody out for how many months? I guess traffic is coming back now, but shit.
Report here is this was the time frame that the COVID-19 pandemic was at its height, and we rerouted our service around civil unrest nightly after the George Floyd's death. The speed and scope of the pandemic posed extraordinary challenges for us.
Yeah, the pandemic. It's not, I'm going to keep repeating it because it's important to understand, it wasn't the pandemic that created the disruption in everybody's life. It was the government response to the pandemic. And yes, 200,000 people are dead, and there's a lot of questions about all of this that I have and a lot of people have as to the COVID world order that's being pushed behind all of this. This is a 9/11 type event that's being pushed here. And all of these technocrats keep talking about it. It's like the COVID created this. No, it's not. Government policy has created the economic mayhem.
Especially as we were educating our customers on the OHA guidelines for wearing a face mask and social distancing. Next slide.
Yeah, half of them wear them. Well, look.
As you see here, we had a 7.4 percentage point increase for our bus on-time performance. The region, again, was under Governor Brown's stay-at-home orders, and there was less traffic on the road. We also had a slight increase on our on-time performance for MAX, but it was essentially stable. Next slide. Looking at our West on-time performance, we had a slight increase of 1.8 percentage points. West on-time performance has recovered nicely after we've installed the positive train control work at the end of 2019. Next slide. Our fixed route bus complaints increased by 11.5 percentage points over 2019 due to COVID-19 public health guidelines, and that was requiring customers to wear masks, requiring customers to social distance, for us to continue to educate about the maximum social distancing vehicle numbers that we could put on the vehicles. We had some escalating anxieties, we had conflicts, and then lastly, we had the civil unrest with the nightly rerouting of our services after George Floyd.
Man, complaints are shot up, man. Yeah, we heard it on the scanner too.
Yes. We had 1,165 complaints from 5 million boardings. Compared to the second quarter of 2019, we had 1,799 complaints from 14.7 million boardings. Next slide. Our max light rail complaints have slightly increased due to COVID and also due to some of the civil unrest. Out of 3.3 million boardings, we had 88 complaints. So if you look across the quarter, there's 90 days in that quarter. So basically we were looking at 1 complaint per day on max. Next slide. Here, we continue to see a decrease in our rail rule violations by 62.6% rule violations per 1 million miles over quarter 2 2019. And this is just great.
Yeah, here, the OCC, Rail Control Safety Announcements, you know. Those are the tweets. Attention, dummies. Fewer new operators, that's true, that makes a difference.
News. We've seen this steady decline over the last 12 months. And I really would like to congratulate our rail operators here, our training staff, our Operation Control Center staff, and our management staff. Next slide. Also good news here in Lyft. We've seen a increase in our miles between road calls by 53.1%. And again, we're continuing to replace older vehicles, and it's led to improved performance. Next slide. Our fixed route mean distance between failure reporting is under review by our service performance and analysis team. We conducted an audit to review all documented maintenance incidents in FY20. And we found several discrepancies with our methodology that's being used. We had a different set of employees that were looking at things one way versus the other. So what we did is our team got together and we have reviewed the FY20 data and we've made adjustments by our performance analysis team. So a revised reporting process will be implemented during the first quarter of 2021. But here, as you see on the graph here, our distance between failures is 34.5 percentage points, or either 10,115 miles between failures. And that's by our maintenance team being able to triage vehicles from the Operation Control Center and also replacing those least reliable buses that are out there. During this time here, if you think about the April, May, June timeframe, we put in place a 20% service reduction that was in service. So we reduced our bus mileage over those 3 months by 1.2 miles over the quarter. One other note that I would like to bring forward here that I think is meaningful is that if you look at average MDBF compared to our peers, which is Los Angeles, King County, Denver, Salt Lake City, and San Diego, their MBDF is totaling about 11,000 miles between failures. So Trimet is right there. We're currently slightly below our peer agency. but we're there. Next slide. Our MICE MDBF has a modest increase of 13.2 percentage points, or 12,262 miles. This is due to fewer failures in our Type 1 doors, which are more prone to failures due to the age. And we are in that process of replacing and decommissioning all 26 of our Type 1 vehicles in the next 2 years. Also, we had a reduction in our propulsion system failures. So that means that more miles between failures brings us higher train reliability and on-time performance. Next slide. Here, great news. Our bus collisions have decreased by 44.4%. This is one of the lowest in 5 years. As I stated earlier, we had 158 collisions over 5.7 million miles for the second quarter of 2020. This decline here is also primarily due to decrease in mirror strikes and fixed objects. Again, less traffic on the road during this period of time due to the stay-at-home orders, but also want to congratulate our bus operators, our training staff, our supervision and management staffs here. Next slide.
What's that?
We've reduced our overall max rail collisions by 12.7 percentage points. Our overall rate remains low. We traveled 1 million miles in the second quarter with only 11 collisions, less than 1 collision per week for the quarter. Again, congratulations to all of our rail operators. Also, as I conclude the second quarter 2020 performance report, COVID-19 pandemic is a crisis unlike any other in recent time. The speed and scope of this virus pose extraordinary challenges for Trimet and the Portland region. But I would like to thank our employees and the leadership for recognizing the crisis and really begin to mount an agency response.
Oh, God. Here.
We were and currently are providing essential and vital service to our customers in all 3 counties of the Portland region. And we're grateful for all of our employees that show up to work despite the risk and fears of this pandemic. Thank you for your time, board. Are there any questions?
No question.
I'm not seeing any hands raised. Does anybody want to have a question or comment for Sam or for Doug?
Sam, I think you dazzled them with the results.
You
So
dazzled them, yeah.
I think we're going to declare victory. I do want to thank Sam for his leadership here in this tumultuous time. Having been a COO a few times in my life, were not easy jobs, particularly this industry. So Sam, thank you for what you're doing out there, and thanks to the team that's doing all the heavy lifting, not just our frontline operators, but all the planners, Steve Callis's and all these planners that spend an immense amount of time digging into this data. We've got a lot of great results here. There really are. Even if you factor out COVID, there are areas to work on. As the general manager, the one area that frankly we have not at industry standard in is our mean distance between failure, particularly on the rail side. We have a lot to do there, and that will come over time. We made progress, but that's one area that is still we're still under construction, if you will. So, but anyway, overall, I think agencies should be proud of what we're doing.
Yeah, we're
Thanks,
proud.
Sam.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Last, and backed by popular demand, Guy Ben, I want to give you an update with Bob Hastings, Lancers, to talk about an affordable housing transit development project that has been working on behind the scenes for quite some time. It's the current site of our Southeast Fuller Road park and ride lot along the Green Line. So I'm just going to turn it right over to you, folks. Bob, Lance, Guy.
Thank you, Doug. President Warner, Board Directors, good morning. Today, on behalf of the TOD team, I'm going to present details on Fuller Station family housing.
What is this?
I'm joined by my colleagues, Lance.
What the hell is this? Now here's where what is Trimet doing with, why are they doing this? They're supposed to be a transportation. This is the problem right here. Why are they doing this? It's supposed to be a transit agency, not a property development agency.
Owners, Director of Real Estate, and Bob Hastings, agency architects, both of whom have been deeply involved in this project from its inception, and will be available to answer questions at the end. We've 8 slides and 10 minutes. We're going to get rolling, and we'll move on to the next slide, please.
45 minutes into this crap.
So what is Fuller Station Family Housing? Fuller Station Family Housing is a 100-unit new construction, 100% affordable housing project that will be built adjacent to Trimet, Fuller Road, Max Light Rail Station.
This was the whole idea of the whole light rail agenda. It used to be called Agenda 21, and then they changed it to another name for it. But the pack and stack. Okay, you pack them into the train and then you stack them into these apartments. This is their idea for the surf population. And you keep them, it's supposed to be so you don't need to use a car, but after this last experience with the government shutdown of everything, you have to be insane to rely on public transportation as your way of getting around. When I was living in Northwest Portland, I didn't need a car because everything was a walking distance. That's really what you need to concentrate on now. Right from where I live right now in Massachusetts, the store is a mile down the road. So it's you don't want to be too far out, and you certainly don't want to be dependent on any public transportation anywhere. Not Trimet, not Boston. Boston's cutting everything. It was already bad, and now they're cutting it all back. And so now it's not going to be usable. Well, what hasn't been usable in a while. Although every time I've taken MBTA, it's been reasonably okay. It's just, your typical unpleasant public transportation ride.
On about 40% of the land area of the existing park and ride site, and will comprise a 6-story building.
6 stories.
In addition to providing much needed affordable housing, it's going to provide significant new amenities, including a new natural playground and land for a new east-west street that will connect the Fuller Road
out there
with the Max station.
Oh my God.
Next slide, please.
Goddamn shit.
Where is the building and how does it integrate with its surroundings? This slide shows the project labeled number 1 in the middle of this map. As you can see, the building itself is located on the west side of the park and ride site, with some dedicated parking between the building and the Max Light Rail Station. It sits on the southern half of the existing park and ride site and occupies about 40% of the current park and ride facility. Item label number 2 identifies the remaining park and ride facility. And so after development of the project, there will be approximately 300 spaces remaining at the Fuller Road Max station for car parking. Prior to the pandemic, as a point of reference, the average daily usage of the park and ride was about 100 spaces. Item number 3 identifies the actual Max Light Rail Station, which you can see lies in immediate proximity. Also, adjacent to the light rail and running parallel to the alignment is a multi-use path targeted at homeless families and individuals, young adults exiting the foster care system, and large families with children. The unit mix, as you can see from this slide, consists mostly of 2- and 3-bedroom units. The average AMI that will be served, if you average out all these numbers, is a 50% AMI. So it's very much serving underprivileged and needy families. There will be 25, or the developer has applied for 25 project-based Section 8 vouchers to support new families moving into the facility. And there will be resident services provided by Join, for a Portland-based homeless service and retention organisation, and developed in Dev Northwest, who is a community group and counselling agency that's piloted 17-year history.
Oh, here's it. Look,
RH Construction, a very well-known.
All right, here's the people making money on it. See, this is the real. All of these places make money building this shit. Okay, it's a pork barrel for them, under the guise of, oh look, we're doing all this for the poor people. But it's, it's a money maker for all of these. Guardian Real Estate. Who the hell are these people? It's a pork barrel.
Construction group with 40 years of operating experience in the Portland area. So a very experienced and diverse local team capable of delivering and operating this project. Next slide, please.
Who's Guardian Real Estate Services?
It would be amiss
look at this.
to present this project and not talk about the project economics. These two charts at the top show the uses of funds for the project, and the bottom chart shows the sources of funds. In total, the project cost is basically a $47.2 million project, all costs included, so land, construction, financing fees, etc. The majority of the costs, as you can see.
All right, so $47 million is being spent to create that. And here, the developer fee is, they get 7% off the top. Financing fee, 7%. And here's another developer fee of 13%. I mean, this is a pork barrel dressed up to be something good. It's, they need to, you know how I feel about this. Nobody cares what I think, but at least I understand. At least, maybe 2 or 3 people will watch this presentation besides myself. At least I understand what they're doing. Nobody else really understands what they're doing.
Represent hard costs and for non-developed.
Who knows what this guy's making?
Individuals, hard costs are really the construction costs, cost of labor and materials to deliver the building. And that is a sum of around 30.6 million, which is very much in line with delivering a project of this size and scope. If you look at the cost per unit, the cost per unit all in is around $472,000 per unit, which again, having looked at comparable projects across
$472,000 per unit. I don't know, man. There's got to be a better way to do this than this. Oh, man. And there is, and it's on one of my pal's Twitter feeds. He shows you can have housing for people at like $1,500 a unit, but it wouldn't fill pockets up. So they're not going to ever pursue these actual reasonably cost ideas because it's all about filling up people's pockets. It's not about helping people.
Pacific Northwest across the Portland area is very much in line with unit costs. Project funding. The development team has worked exceptionally hard, as you can see from the second chart, to basically secure all the project funding that is needed to deliver this project. And I think what's key to note here is that there are 8 different funding sources that that the development team has basically managed to secure and coordinate to deliver the project. The various elements, I'll just talk about the 3 largest ones. The low-income housing tax credits is a well-established federal program. That is effectively equity. That is around $17 million worth of money. The developer has secured permanent debt from a well-known national bank. That's $15 million. And then there is...
All right, stop. I found the tweet. Let me show you. And I just retweeted it, so it should be right on my... And here it is, right here. This deck is seriously going to change what you think is possible for the future of our species. Okay. $1,500 per unit. Can't be mass produced without any copyright and license. Can't be manufactured from almost any industrial sheet. Even if you gold plate it, it's less than $5,000. Add additional smaller hexayurets as bedrooms or private offices. Panels can be reused in other buildings. The mortgage is obsolete. The 2008 crisis never happen again. This here is an actual